return at this point, and you don't even realize that you are, but you're just lost, and you need to find yourself and step into another place mentally to recover, just as losing a person. We hold on to people. As humans, we're selfish, and we don't realize that everything is temporary, and we don't accept it, and we want everything that we want that holds on to love inside of us. We want to keep that and hold on to that forever. So when it's gone, we don't know how to keep going because it feels like we're missing a piece. I've experienced that. I think the heaviest moment I've experienced that was the grief of my grandmother back in 2016. And I think the biggest part was that to me, she was immortal. You know, no matter how old she got, no matter how broke down she got, she just wasn't going anywhere. Granny is gonna always be there. You'll always hear her voice. She was the glue. And the way I lost her, I didn't get to say goodbye. So I felt like, I think I held on to that for so long because I didn't get to separate from that moment. And I didn't realize until I dug deep and really got even more spiritual than I am now to understand maybe God didn't want me to say goodbye in that way, that I had to remember her the way she was. So very, very short story. We knew she was getting sick, and she was in the hospital. I got the call after she had her stroke. She got in the hospital, and I was here. She was a PA, and they were like, Granny's gonna be in the hospital, we need to come see her. And I'm like, okay, let me get off of work. So my job would let me go at the post office, and I was like, well, after work, I will leave. I drove up there, but since I waited, I'm on the road. I'm 20 minutes out of PA, and my sister said, take your time, baby girl. She's already gone. Flipped out. Never forgave myself for that, because I said, if I would have just left at that moment, I would have caught her eyes open. I would have be able to say my last words to her and tell her that I love her. But going through time and understanding, I was like, well, maybe God didn't want me to see her that way. Maybe I would have lost my mind even more if I saw her when she left. That would have been devastating to see her slip away. Maybe I just needed to know that she was okay. And when I got to see her, when I made it there, she had a smile on her face. I probably wouldn't have seen that smile, because all I would have known is that I watched her go. So I held on to that, and I punished myself for that for so long because I needed to tell her some things, and we don't realize we need to say those things now. So holding on to that, and then other life circumstances that, I used to beat myself up for losing myself. I felt like I was grieving in that matter, and it's a learning process. So pouring myself into my talents, pouring myself into others, it helps me see that and heal from those things. So, I thank God every day that I'm able to find a place to put that in, but not everybody can find that. Not everyone has somewhere to put those emotions. I'm able to create beautiful things like artwork and do things on people and watch them bloom and know that I helped touch their lives to say, I'm gonna be okay now. And, but not everyone has that. So, I don't want to ramble too much, but that's how I feel about it.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yes, thank you for sharing your heart. I can tell you and your grandmother were very close. What are some common ways that people manifest grief and respond to loss? The first thing I thought of was denial. Our culture tends to create a space where it gives the facade that everyone's life is perfect and we're doing good and we're always joyful and happy. So for individuals to be going through grief, it can be difficult. It can be hard to just acknowledge that, hey, I'm not happy here. I'm not happy in this space. What we call it in the Grief Recovery Method Program, STERB, S-T-E-R-B, it's called Short-Term Energy Relieving Behaviors. And what individuals tend to do, rather than dealing with the grief, the inner pain, they do other things. They go shopping, or they go to church. Sometimes church can be a short-term energy relieving behavior when you don't deal with the issues that's causing the pain. Drinking, sexing, drugs, these are all temporary fixes for inner pain So for me to share how I first started doing the grief work, I was going through a divorce actually. I was married for 20 years, and one night I was tucking my daughter in the bed, and she told me that her father was touching her inappropriately. And that took us on a long journey, as you can imagine. This is my ex-husband and his natural daughter, our daughter. And so that was a lot of grief, loss of trust. Grief is the normal, natural response to loss. As my sister said to my right, it doesn't necessarily have to be through death. Loss of trust, loss of safety, loss of health. That was betrayal. I lost the trust in a husband. I had been married for 20 years, and this is something that had gone on for 5 years, and I couldn't understand why my daughter didn't tell me that. So through a long process and a journey of healing and looking and seeking for answers and just acknowledging that this had happened to our family, because something as devastating as that created grief from a loss, my mindset prior to her sharing that was that happens to other families, not to our family. But the reality was that it had happened to our family. So what common ways people manifest grief and respond? There is a multitude of different ways. I think the most important thing is to do the inner work and to acknowledge a certain behavior can be driving really grief from a loss that you really haven't acknowledged.
Yeah, so I'm just going to piggyback off of everyone and, not repeat, but in my world, like the maladaptive behaviors, those are the, negative behaviors we go to, like sexting, aspects like that, denial, blaming, all those aspects we believe when something happens to us, we don't want to take the self-reflection, right? And it's not always our fault, right? When it comes to not just to death, but like with grieving, period. And so my story, like I said, I felt like I was grieving since I was born because both my parents are drug addicts. And so I had to deal with that aspect before I even understood what was going on. And so I had to work through that process of, I don't have my parents, why? My grandmother, like she said, my grandmother's absolutely amazing. She will be 90 on Saturday. And so, like she said, I can't see my life without her, but I'm preparing myself now because I know it's going to happen. And so as I prepare myself, it gets a little bit easier because all these memories that we're making, it's like I can keep them. But my grief really came about in 2018. My dad died January 7th, 2018. And me and him are the same exact person. We can hold a grudge till we can't hold a grudge no more. But my birthday was the previous November, and we finally talked, and he said, I think it's time for me to grow up. And so that made me feel better because when my niece called me in January and said, Granddad is gone, I knew that we had our conversation. But then in September of 2018, my uncle, my mother's brother, who was my father, died in a car accident. So it's like I'm still grieving from January. Then I get to September, my whole world is like, I don't want to do nothing. Nothing at all. Like depression comes from, grieving. And so you have to fully pull yourself out of it in a sense. And that's when I came with that acronym. I'm all about acronyms. I use acronyms for everything. And that's how I get into understanding myself when it comes to grief. So when I think about grief, grappling with the loss, understanding it, working through it, reflecting on the memories, memory journals. I do that all the time. Write a letter in that moment of, I want to tell you something, so I'm going to tell you. However I'm going to tell you, I'm going to tell you. Integrating my emotions. See, one thing about even being African American, or just period, we don't acknowledge our emotions. We keep it in and just say, I'm gonna be okay. It's okay to acknowledge our emotions. We have every right to feel that emotion. And as we acknowledge, the more that you acknowledge it, the more it becomes normal. The more that you acknowledge it, the more it becomes normal. So I just want y'all to remember that. And then embracing the healing, because it will happen. and it never has a time frame. It happens when it happens. It can go years. And then the last one is finding your strength, and just finding the strength and remembering all those memories. So when you manifest grief, you manifest it in a way of always thinking about the negative. Many people, when they think about grief, they think about the negative because that's who we are. We naturally think about negative. But you can think about some positives out of grief because you've learned something, you've made something, you've seen something that you're not going to go back to. So instead of manifesting the negative aspects, think about what the positives are. And then like with the response to loss, we always go to, negative behaviors such as doing things that we might not naturally do. Maybe it's smoking, maybe it's drinking, being late for work, all those other aspects that we don't normally do, we start to do that. So.
Thank you, ladies. I love that everybody in my tribe is just a heavy hitter with these deep experiences. They are truly overcomers. I'm in such good company. Try not to cry. Okay. So 2018 was a hard year, as you mentioned. And it wasn't just hard for me, it was hard for several people in my community with transitioning of loved ones and loss and trauma. So for me, I'm an only child. My mother was really it, and my grandmother. So those are my parents who raised me. My mother passed in 2018, and it was very sudden. Even though she had an illness since I was younger called sarcoidosis, which is related to COVID, it affects your lungs. And but she had been in remission, and we lost my grandmother, my grandfather, my uncle, and so all of that flared that up in her. And it was hard because it was unexpected, and because I thought I had been living my life a certain way so that we would have our dreams manifested with adding to our small family. So when it happened, it was like my dreams died too. My dreams of the future. I thank God for my support system. Janina is part of that. Because I don't have a close blood family, people have to choose me to be a part of their family. So even though I had to bury my mother, I wasn't alone because of my support system. One of the ways that I know I manifested my grief was escapism. Some of the things that you guys touched on, just running away. I was so scared to face that depth of pain. I thought it would swallow me whole. And then I was so angry. I was angry for at least 3 years, just mad at life, mad at God, mad at the plan. But it's been so encouraging to come alongside so many others who understand, and you don't even have to go through the same thing. Like, our circumstances could be different. It's nice to hear that there are different types of grief, divorce, parents who are dealing with substance abuse. I know there was grief from not having my father there. I know there was grief from waiting for the right marital partner. There's just been a lot of griefs happening. But the one with my mom was so huge because it really was just us. It was unexpected, and it wasn't the plan. And I'm a planner. And life doesn't care if you're a planner. Life be lifing, like they say. So I'm here with the hope of transformation, and I'm just creating a space for all of us to experience that today.
Thank you all for sharing.
Yes.
I'm really, so I'm really glad to hear, so as your doctor, so you confirmed this for me. The being late for work, as far as like that being a symptom. Now I talked about my general lateness. That's been a lifelong, struggle. Okay, but I've grown in that area. But being late for work though was not really one of those things that was a thing for me. And I'm a teacher, so okay, that's my profession, my passion. So you can't really, I mean, you shouldn't really be late for work like that. You know, teaching somebody's kids, you know. And sure enough, like 2 years, like I just came out of that this school year, like, oh, I'm on time for work again. Like that was it, you know, that was not something that I connected to my grief initially. It was only like after some time, I'm like, what is wrong with me? Because this is egregious. This is real bad, you know. So I'm glad to hear that. But in considering it, so like, what is grief? I think that was the question.
Yeah, and what are some common ways to respond?
Okay, so my tardiness to work was one. But as you all were talking, like one of the things that I wrote down was that grief is just living. It is just living. It's the things that we face just in our daily experiences. And so I'm trying to think, like, how can I try to speak succinctly about it? Choosing to what to say first here. What I will say is that my first encounter, like outside of like losing a loved one, which I definitely experienced that when I was younger, but just in terms of a grief that wasn't the transition of a loved one, grief in terms of a life you thought you were gonna have. So for me, that was in college where I first began to develop an understanding of what that could be like choosing to walk away from certain things, choosing to give up certain things, really for the sake of Christ. And my understanding of what I needed to do at that particular time in my life. And so I just made a series of difficult decisions that for me involved a lot of sacrifice and that hurt, you know. So I would say that was like my first introduction to like, okay, this is like, how is it that you go on living with this thing that feels like this constant thorn in your side. And so for me, part of the ways that I think by the time I graduated from college and got ready to get my first job, and I wound up not getting the job that I thought I was going to get, and I got really angry. So this was like the introduction of like me feeling like, oh, I can take these emotions to God. So as you mentioned, like choosing faith as an outlet for the grief that you experience. When I didn't get this particular job and I found out on my birthday, I was like, oh, like, Lord, you knew this was gonna happen, and I just felt like it was a setup. And like, you could have done something about this, and you chose not to. And so as a result, there's a scripture, I think it's like Psalm 62:8. It's like, pour out your heart before God. God is a refuge for us. And beginning to be able to just express my pain to the Lord, like, I am hurting, like, and I'm holding you responsible for the way that I'm hurting. That was the start of that. So a series of different things, and I began to develop the habit of like bringing my pain to the Lord. And most recently, what started me on the journey of having that be the theme for season 1 of my podcast was a transition of one of my aunts in 2021, and she had been sick for a very long time. Super close. She was also an educator, and the rock of our family, like the matriarch after my grandmother passed away. Like, my Aunt Jackie was like, she was that one for all of us. And so in the aftermath of losing her, again, just a lot of the things that some of you have said, just with the denial. And I would say instead of denial, it was more like a definitely spending I think that was a big one for me that I was not expecting to be an issue, especially if it wasn't necessarily on clothing. But I was like buying things for the house, like, just I could not tell myself no in any area. So like my history with grief was feeling like, Lord, I'm sacrificing this stuff all for the sake of Christ, feeling like I had lived my life like that for so many years, and then sharing the common one of like, Lord, where's this man at? Where's he at? Thinking that, not expecting to be single, at 40. I turned 40 earlier this year. So not expecting that to be a part of my story either, and just feeling like I'm not telling myself no anymore for anything. And financially is really where I saw that surface. And thankfully, like the cloud of grief, I feel like is lifting in a way to where I'm coming out of that, but I'm still dealing with the repercussions of some of that recklessness that I had. And then also anger and wishing it was other people, honestly, and not me. Like there was a lady, and poor lady, I don't know her, she was just in front of me at the pharmacy. And I'm hearing her give her birth date to the pharmacist, and I hear it's like, she older than Jackie. She looked to be in good health, and it's like, well, why she still gets to be here, And so, yeah, that's all.
Thank you, Jamia. So I'm going to ask the next question. Are there ways your body can be affected, or was your body affected health-wise due to grief and trauma? And I think we'll start with Dr. Shamara and then kind of go back, take it back down.
Absolutely. I'm a true believer holistically, whatever your mental health is, it affects your spiritual life and your physical well-being. So if you didn't, just say for grief, if it got to a certain point where, you were depressed, didn't want to get up, that can lead to manifestation of thinking you have some health issues, maybe, high blood pressure or sometimes autoimmune diseases, sometimes lupus can be in there manifesting and you never did anything to have it come out, but yet you get to a stressful position, it starts to show. I can say that for myself because that's what I have. I was stressed to a certain point and it was already there, but I didn't know I had it. Then I had the whole stress of the grief and depression, and then that's when it showed. And so, gladly, it's over. I don't know, I believe in God and everything else, but it's in remission. It's been in remission for Gabby's 11, so 11 years since I had my daughter. But yeah, so you definitely can have some health issues when it comes to really diving into your mental health that can lead to other aspects if it gets to that a point. So what was the other part of the question? That was it?
If it just manifests in your body, any types of ways?
Yeah. It could be everything. Like I just think about sleep, like that. You can sleep forever or you can not sleep at all. It just all depends on the environment that you're in, who you surround yourself with to get out of it. If you're alone or isolating yourself, because that also puts into place, if I'm isolating myself, I'm not being around anyone to bring me out of it, which is gonna cause me to, not wanna do anything. So that was my answer.
One of the things we say, man is triad, body, soul, spirit. So if grief, which is part of our emotions, is affecting us in a third of who we are, it affects everything. It can even affect your spirit, not just your physical body, it can affect your heart. One of the things we say is when your heart is broken, your head doesn't work right. Mm-hmm. So if your heart is broken, grief, due to some loss, then your head not working right, meaning the choices and the decisions that you're making. So that could be in how you eat. So your poor eating habits, poor sleeping habits, as she said. And I also heard some of the ladies mention too, more prone to accidents. that we're not paying attention to, more prone to accidents and losing things. All of these can be a reflection of grief that due to a loss that we may or may not even be aware of. So yes, most definitely.
Piggyback somewhat of what you ladies were speaking of, it definitely affects your body. When I spoke about losing yourself, that grief, that was me. I was in a very domestically violent marriage, probably 13, 14 years ago. It's been about 14 years now. It was my children's father, so that's how long I've been divorced. But it was a roller coaster of different things. My weight, you know, at one point I was like so unhealthy, just like super skinny, and all of a sudden I would just gain so much weight. You know, there were moments where I would get paralyzed in my bed, where I don't even realize that's what I'm grieving. I just can't seem to gather my thoughts enough to figure out what the hell am I supposed to do today. Like, I have so much to do, but I am not touching any of it. Like, I want to clean my house, and I sat there and stared at it, and before I know it, I blink, it's 8 o'clock at night, and I'm still staring at the four walls. Like, I just don't want to wake up today. I just don't feel like moving. I don't want to people. And then there's times where it just switches, like a total 360, and now I'm staying so busy that I'm not even caring for myself. So I'm just running at 100 miles per hour, and I'm going, and that's when I get unhealthy. That's when I'm not eating right. I'm either not eating at all, or I'm eating the worst crap ever, at the worst times ever, because I'm not eating right. And that leads to a lot of things. You know, I've had moments where I've had like ulcers in my stomach because I'm just stressing. You could stress and not even know you're stressing. And that's when I went into the pouring into other people, because I didn't realize I'm still not healed, because I need to feel better by making someone else feel better. So it's kind of like the total opposite, you know, of what you were speaking of wishing on someone. I don't need you to feel the way I felt. So I need you to smile. Whatever I need to do for you, I'm gonna make you smile. And then that leads into the bad decisions, because the wrong people will step into your space, and you wanna please them because you're not whole. And so I felt myself making even the unworthiest people happy just to make myself happy. And that was very unhealthy. And it took a wear and tear on my body. It could make your hair fall out. It could make your skin not be well. You know, you can read it all over everything. And, you know, outside of just drinking and creating unhealthy habits for yourself, that's what I dove into, until I had to look in the mirror like, remember who the F you are, right? And then you try to start to take one thing at a time to change those habits. But yes, it most definitely wears on you. Migraines, all types of things of your body, it wears and tears, and it affects you in every way. But I'm better now. It's good. I'm better now.
So I'll share. I thought about something that you said reminded me. I was going through a transition in my career. I had been unemployed. I was unhappy, and I finally got this really great job. And then my former employer was like, "Nope, you can't work there. You signed this non-compete." And I'm like, "What?" So I went through a battle, and I was so stressed that my hair fell out. Like, I was just so stressed, and but God said, "You've never seen me fight for you, watch me fight for you." And so 2 months to the date, exactly that job said you can't work here, I ended up in that position, and I worked there almost 9 years. So, but there was such a warfare trying to keep me from that position. So that was one thought I had about grief in a space that's not even a loss of a person, but just something difficult you're going through. With my mom, because it was a shock, because I found her and had no idea that I was going to that day, I was in this space of shock, and I couldn't sleep. Now, everybody who know me know I love to sleep. I take naps every day. I'm not ashamed. It was a Kirk kids, okay? But I could not sleep, and that's when I knew like something's wrong with me, you know. But the other thing is, the flip side was I got heavy into working out. Like, I was already active, I was already working out, but then weeks before she passed, I started doing strength training. And that was something I know God was giving me ahead of time, because when she passed, strength training was a lifesaver. And I was spending 2 hours a day in the gym, 6 days a week, like going hard. And God said, you're gonna have to be stronger than you've ever been. Like, this is what I'm doing in you. So it was grace for that, you know? So on one side, it's just like this trauma, but then on the other side, it's like the grace of God. So I just wanted to share that.
It's my turn.
No,
Okay.
all right, we gonna figure it out, okay. The question again is like. I
It
wrote
was
notes, but-
how can ways grief affect your body?
Okay. I definitely saw aspects of that just and at different times, but more recently, just dealing with intense anxiety in a way to where it's like, no, I have to lay down. Like I can't do anything else. And the first time it happened, one of my cousins is a trainer at a gym, and so I went to one of his classes, and this was a couple months after our aunt had passed, and I was doing some kind of exercise, and it just really shouldn't have required the exertion from me that I was given from it. It was a really, what I felt like was a crazy reaction, to where I had to like just stop, sit on the floor in the gym. He had to get me some water, and he's looking like, what's going, you good? Are you okay? And it's like I had to, get my breathing under control, before I could even really say anything, and even try to explain, like, I think this is connected to that, connected to grief, but not being really sure. But other moments when I noticed I was kind of feeling like that, and it hasn't happened a whole bunch of times, but enough for me to know, like, okay, this is part of a grief response that I'm having here. Also eczema, like I only have those breakouts when, like, I guess it's my body's way of processing whatever it is that I'm dealing with. So even if I'm not consciously trying to address it, and I want to be able to avoid things, then it shows up in my body in some kind of way. Another way that I saw it, just mental clarity. I just didn't have it. So even though I'm someone that loves to read, I stopped really being able to. So like, not that I lost the ability to read altogether, I'm not saying that, but in terms of being able to concentrate on a text in front of me, I could not do it. And really, I'm better with that now, but it's like I've transitioned to just listening to a lot of things now, instead of trying to focus and look at it, just because that became very difficult for me to do.
So the next question we're gonna ask is, were there any crazy things you did or know of others doing when struggling with grief? And I'm gonna kick this one off because it's just a funny story. Okay, so I was washing my wig. It's like, how do you start this? I was washing my wig, and I washed it in the bathtub, and so I'm running a bath, and then this guy that I'm talking to at the time calls, and this is the thing, let me give you a little backstory. I'm like a very type A responsible person. Like, I'm very much cross my T's, dot my I's, by the book, blah, 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 right? So I don't do stuff like this. I don't lose track of time. I don't forget things. Like, that's just not me. Well, grief brain, I guess that's the thing. I'm talking to this guy on the phone for like an hour or two. And then I go back, I'm like, I hear something. Like, what am I hearing? Okay, the bathtub has overflowed, the wig is swimming somewhere, and it's so bad that the water creeps through downstairs. I have water damage in the living room ceiling to the basement's flooding. This is how bad it was, y'all. It was horrible. So thankfully, my spiritual father is a handyman, so he was over repairing stuff. But to this day, my best friend will say, "Girl, I can just picture that wig floating down the stairs." I'm like, really? This is what we talking about? This is what we like? another funny thing, which is not so funny, but that I noticed was due to the grief, was I kept leaving my keys in the door. Like I would, again, I'm very responsible. It's like, what is happening? But I would leave my keys in the door, and then I wake up the next morning, can't find them, and it's still in the thing. And it was like protection over my life, because I kept doing that during that time frame. But that's over now. I have successfully washed my wigs, and my keys are not in the door.
You wanna go first? You can go first.
I would say for me, even being naturally forgetful and stuff like that, it increased. So forgetfulness with things. And so one morning, my laptop for work and a journal I put on top of my trunk. I don't know what I was doing, but I put it on top of the trunk and got in, drove myself to work. And driving down the street, and I live like about 30 minutes on the expressway, from my job. And so I get closer to the school, and I'm like, where's my computer? And I'm like, oh my gosh. So I get there, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I drove off with this on my trunk. And so I had to call my mom, like, can you please drive down my street and see if you see my computer? And she did. She found my computer, So it's like, but the journal that stayed missing. So that just in terms of me just totally not being with it at all to like realize that something had happened. So that was one example. And then I don't feel like it's crazy, but it was uncharacteristic for me. I got tattoos. So I went and got tattoos in memory of my aunt. Like I got 3 in one day because I couldn't decide on what to get, But they all are significant, like in terms of right. Right. So, but it's like never something that I had considered, but it was something that crazy for anyone that would have known me prior to, like, oh, I'm surprised you would, but it gave me a lot of comfort to do it. So, yeah.
I don't think I have a specific crazy story. I just used to find myself doing like the weirdest stuff, and it was just like, what is wrong with you? Like airheaded stuff. Like I would forget what time I had to be to work. Like I wake up in the morning and just be like, okay, wait, I had to be to work at 9. So that means if I wake up at 7, I got this much time. No, wait, it's not 9 o'clock. Like, okay, you got 30 minutes. Before I know it, it's 9 o'clock, and I'm like, oh shoot, I'm late for work. Oh, and it's weird. And then driving to work, I would lose myself a lot. I got stuck on using GPS because I couldn't figure out where I was going. I would be driving, and then suddenly I would just make the wrong turn. Like, where am I driving to? Oh no, it's this street. So now I gotta make a U-turn. Then I make the U-turn and still go the wrong way. And I'm still like, wait, I don't know where I'm going. I'm lost. To go into a place that I go every single day. And I'm always just driving. I'll be on the highway. Oh crap, now I gotta go down 2 more exits to turn around. Now I don't even know which way I'm supposed to go. Like, I don't know where I am. And I'm just driving. Because driving was my peace. It's like how I process things and think, and I would just lose myself driving. And I'm like, I don't even know where I'm going right now. So I was very late all the time. And I didn't want to be there anyway, so. But yeah, it was just, those were some of the weird things that I would do. It was just crazy. Like, okay, how are you gonna ever get home right now? Because you just need to figure this out right now, because you'll be out of gas.
I can think of something pretty funny and crazy. I need to give you a backdrop first. I got married very young. I got married at 18. So as I said, my ex-husband and I have been married almost 20 years. So our story was sort of like a storybook story. We married our so-called high school sweetheart. We had another child, so 2 children, the picket fence, the dog. He had a good job, I had a good job. We were young and just really acquiring a lot of things and materialism, and all of a sudden, our world comes tumbling down. So the funny thing that I can think of I did going through this process of loss and shock and betrayal and all of that, I remember, I'm mad at God. I heard someone else say they got angry with God, and that's normal. That's totally fine. God can handle it. So I'm And I was gonna go somewhere where nobody knew me, right? So I get in my vehicle and I drive to this bar to drink. And as soon as I walk in, who do I see sitting at the bar? Some people that I knew, that I didn't think I was going to, anyone I was going to know. But that didn't stop me. So I drank my Long Island iced tea. How I made it home, only having nose. Right. And I lost my contact. I have no idea what happened to those contact lenses. But my thinking was, I'm angry with God, I'm serving Him, doing the things that you're supposed to do, and this happens, really? And angry and just needing to do something. You have all these pent-up emotions on the inside, turmoil, then I'm trying to create stability for my children. I still have 2 children to raise, addressing it with my husband. How do you approach your husband when your child tells you something like that? All of those things, and I'm just angry at God. And I was just going to drink my angry little soul to death without anyone knowing, identifying me. And then I ended up sitting at the bar with individuals who did know me. And I just wondered what in the world happened to that contact lens that I never found. I did take them out when I got home and never did find the contact lens. So we do, when we're dealing with emotion and grief and loss and all of those things, those emotions can be so overwhelming and so strong on the inside that we do crazy things or not fully present, is what I was hearing my sister say. And just getting to a point and place of walking through it, just walking through it. Grief is a normal, natural response to loss, and in our world we learn how to acquire things all the time, houses, shoes, purses, clothes, but we don't talk enough about losing things, which is a normal part of life, loss. So that's a pretty crazy story for me.
I don't think, I might have one, but I'm the person, like Nicole said, I remember everything, like your birthday, your child's birthday, your parents' birthday. And so in 2018, I forgot everything. So I was off. My husband was definitely off because I'm the one that reminds him. And it was just horrible. But I had to work late one day, and I thought I parked my car in the same place that I park every day. And this lady has the same exact car as me. And I'm literally trying to break in the car, like, my key not working. I don't know what's going on. It's dead. My phone dead. So I'm trying to call my husband, like, I don't know what to do. The security guard, like, what are you doing? I'm like, I can't get in my car. I'm crying. Like, I can't get in my car. I'm just trying to go home. And he was like, can I see your keys? And he was like, your car's over there. I said, can this be between me and you? I'm like, I don't want you to think I'm crazy because I'm not. He was like, just go have a great day. But I think that was the most reality check for myself to say, it's time to get it together, Shamara. Like, this is it. Like, you could have went to jail or something. Like, I'm literally in this lady, I don't know who car it is. I'm like, well, I remember how you're supposed to get in the car. You're supposed to stick something in the window, like, and it's supposed to pop open. And I'm like, what? Like, really? Like, I'm the person with integrity. Like, I do right. I'd be scared to go to jail, but I'm just like, I just gotta get home. I'm like, I didn't even think about to look all the way back there to see that was my car. So that was.
So you definitely reminded me that something similar happened to me. I know what it was, so thank you for that. We'll start with you, Dr. Shamara, and you can bring it down this way. How can, we kind of touched on this a little bit, but just let's dive in a little bit more. How can grief affect your faith, your relationship with, or perception of the divine?
That's a great question for me, because if you don't know me, I battle with my spiritual side all the time. Just because growing up with my parents not being there, you always ask the question, why me? Why can't I have my mom and dad? Why my friends have their mom and dad and I can't have mine? And so that hindered my belief like I had a foundation of spirituality, because growing up in the church with my grandmother who raised me, she gives us that spiritual foundation. She guided us. But in myself, it was like, you already gave me, I'm already 10 steps behind everybody else. So why do I have to believe in something if he didn't give me the foundation to believe in him with the parents that's supposed to be with me? So that's how it started off. And as I grew, like my faith kind of grew, but I still was grieving. I still had that mistrust. It's like, how am I still supposed to trust you? And it wasn't until in 2018 when my dad and my uncle passed away, it made me really believe that I have to have faith in something, because you've taken basically the two men who were really important in my life, you took them away. And so what makes me think that you're not gonna take my husband away? You took my dad, you took my uncle who was my dad. Now I have to deal with potentially this could happen to me, he can take him away. But I had to really, really understand that what he took away from me came back even greater in the long run. And so grief can affect your faith tremendously, but I learned from that grief how I can be closer in faith, because it just allowed me to understand that it really made me understand he won't put more on you than you can bear. And that's when I truly realized it, all the way from born to when I was 35. At 35, I understood and I knew. And so the other part is your relationship and perception. And so now it's like nothing bothers me now. Like everything used to bother me before. I used to let everything, anxiety, I used to always like why I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do. You know, I'm going to be the first doctor in my family. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. But it gave me a perception of when they died, like my dad, the last thing he said was, you're about to do everything that you said you wanted to do when you were a kid. For that, I'm thankful. With my uncle, we had a bet saying the first person who gets in the Cleveland Heights Hall of Fame, we got to pay each other $1,000. And so for me, it was like, I don't have anybody to go back with because you're gone. So, but in my eyes, it made me realize I'm not going to do it by myself. I'm going to do it. You know, we still going to do it together. So from the moment he died, I gave $3,000 in scholarship to Cleveland Heights Foundation for scholarships to students. But now I'm in a position to be in the Cleveland Heights Hall of Fame, and it won't be by myself. It will be with him. So it just made me believe in all the faith that I felt like I lost or never had. It made me really see, like, he's really there. He's really guiding you, and everything happens for a reason and a purpose. And you just have to hold on to that purpose and be open to receiving it.
Wow, that's amazing. Amazing, amazing. How can grief affect your faith? It's twofold. It can affect your faith in a positive way or in a negative way. Because I guess we all would agree serving God is a mystery. And you come to the reality that we live on two realms. We live on a tangible realm, the earthly realm. Yet for those of us who are believers, there's a spiritual realm that's intangible, yet it's real. The spiritual realm is more real than the earthly realm, yet the tangible realm seems like it's more real. So when you go through loss that creates grief and all the emotions that fall out from that and the mystery of God, and as Nicole said, she's a planner and she had her life all planned. And my life was pretty planned too, being married that long and having got married so young, and then all of a sudden your world turns upside down or your plans just fall apart. And the mystery of God, you know, God who watches over us and who's a heavenly Father and who's supposed to love us, yet to allow us to go through so much pain and heartache. And sometimes that pain and heartache, as I heard my sister say, well, you don't even want to get up out of the bed. I went through that as well too, losing a lot of weight, anorexic. People thought I was anorexic because my head was so much bigger than my little skinny body. And yet to still hold the faith, as I shared, I was angry at God. I was mad a struggle. And then when he's silent in that space, that's a struggle. That's a real struggle. And it's a part of life because life is broken. Yet for me, how my losses have really helped strengthen my faith, as my sister said, and it is an amazing story, an amazing journey, and more as God reveals himself in that dark place. Because God will reveal himself in the dark place. And that's the beauty of it, to go through the darkness and then in the darkness to see that ray of light and hope. It could be in the smallest, littlest, seemingly insignificant thing. Because I went through 3 years of depression as well too, and another because I remarried and then I'm twice divorced. And I think that relationship was just a spill out of not being healed from the first relationship and marrying an older man and he was emotionally abusive and going through that dark place. I'm wondering where God is. Yet the ray of hope is he's always there. He's always there in the darkness. God is there in the darkness as well in the light. We look for him differently. We look for him differently. And all of the cliches and how you doing today? Oh, I'm fine, blessed and highly favored, all those cliches that can hide pain and the reality of what's real in your innermost being, the depth of who you are as a person. When you're going through that dark place, through loss and grief and heartache and pain, and you may have a family or you may not have a family. You may have a support system or may not have a support system. But even if you do, they can't reach you at the depth when you're going through a hard, dark place like God can. So that's why I said there's a duality to life. And there's a duality to our growing in faith. And that duality is the very things that Satan wants to use to oppress us and take us away from God hold the greatest potential to draw us near to God. Yet, it's a choice. It's a choice that we make each and every day. And we don't always make the right choices, but his love and him sending us the Holy Spirit is to help. I remember one day I was just crying, couldn't stop crying. And I had a divine encounter. And it was so clear. The Lord said, cry if you must. But I want you to know you confuse the angels who are around you because there's no crying in heaven. Man, I gotta stop crying, got up out that bed, took a shower, had me a wonderful day. So it's just amazing. We accept the brokenness of life because it's a reality of life because of sin. Yet, because God is love, I don't believe he'll allow us to go through those dark places just to go through them. There's a purpose in our pain because love wouldn't be love if we went through pain just to go through pain. But like I heard my sister say and some of the other ladies too, going through the grief and the darkness and the hard places actually can open up to us the mystery of his love in ways we would never experience without the darkness.
So I guess we can all continue to say piggyback because we're gonna be sharing things. But so I'll just tell you from my view. It most definitely did affect me more than I realized. So going through a lot of my issues of grieving and losing myself, I would question like, I'm really not doing anything bad to anyone, so why is this happening to me? I'm a good woman. Why am I getting abused? You know, I'm taking care of my children. Like I'm trying to go through my head of what mistakes did I make that make this happen to me. And I was hoarding on all the negative. And I'm like, okay, well now I gotta go and do this. Why am I losing? And I felt like I was losing. And I'm just like, okay, well I'll just make what my sister told me. She was like, you're just making your everyday ugly your normal. What everyone thinks it's crazy, you've gotten so comfortable with it to just accept it, and you made it your normal. And I think that's what I did. I questioned myself so much. I was just like, well, maybe I just did some really messed up stuff when I was younger, and I'm just going to be punished about it. I made my bed, and I'm going to lie in it. And I really felt like I just let go and didn't even really, I felt like I had faith, but not realizing at the moment I did not. I thought I did.
Yeah.
I thought I did. I am such a godly person. I was raised around multiple religions. I'm very spiritual, not religious. And but I'm heavy on God. I'm heavy on God. But I view everything in a different way. But I lost it until the pivotal moment. I was working at the post office, and I was going to court, girl, almost every 2 weeks. This was like the longest drawn out, most miserable harassment of the end of a divorce ever in life. It was like a TV show. Like you would think I made it all up. And I came in there and I was just so done. I was exhausted, I was shaking, I just looked horrible. You would thought I was on drugs, because I went in there crying. I didn't realize that my coworker was a pastor. And he just was like, come on in the office for a second. And I was like, I just can't no more. Like, I just can't. And I'm just like pouring out crying. He said, do you know that everything God put you through is not always for you? And I was like, what do you mean? What does it have to do with me right now? Like, I don't understand. And I'm like, just tripping. But it took some time. And slowly through time, repeating that to myself, like, it stuck to me. It stuck in my head for so long, until one day he invited me to his church. And I don't really go to anywhere. He invited me to his church and he said, I just want you to talk about your experience. It's Women's Day. Can you just do this for me, please? I'm like, all right, fine, Tony. Like, I'll come. And I went and spoke, and this young lady came up to me. And she looked at me in my eyes and was like, I would have never known. But hearing that from you, you just made me feel like I can get through anything. And I was like, I don't know, that mess I just told you up there that make you feel better. I was like, but it sat with me.
Yeah.
And then I repeated that in my head again, like, everything you go through is not always for you. Like, wow, I didn't ask for this armor. And in that moment, I started to, instead of hoarding on all the negative things that were happening to me, I started looking at the outcome. It's like, God took all my money and made me a single mom. But these people that didn't even know me would walk up, literally had people walking up to me handing me things like, a customer gave me a gift of money. I know I'm not supposed to take it, but I ain't in the post office somewhere, so I can't get in trouble. She used to come in all the time and would see pictures of my children. She was just like, your kids need this. Happy Merry Christmas. Don't thank me, thank God. Don't open it. If you start crying, I'm gonna run like you ain't never met me. And of course I cried anyway. But she gave me like $500.
Wow.
Why? Who are you? Who am I? You know, I didn't tell you I needed this. I'm not, some type of sob story and donation plate. Like, but she did this for me, and he was like, these are the things that, God did for you. You have to start saying these things. I was wondering why I'm at court every day. Like, but the outcome of it was everything was working in my favor. Yes, I was tired. Yes, I was missing work. Yes, I was done. Like, I'm in this by myself, and I'm watching my children go through this. But everything continued to work in my favor. And so, in one side, yes, my faith was tested until I had to really receive what was happening to me to understand these things are working out in my favor the way that God planned them out to be. It's not all bad, even though it looks ugly. And so I had to turn that around. So then my faith got stronger. And now you can't tell me nothing, child. You can't tell me nothing. The way I received my space that you are sitting in today, no PPP, no grants, no loans. I got denied for everything. No man, no sugar daddy. I have nobody stepping up to say, here, let me help you do this. But God placed certain people in my way that I had to pay for. But I'm still here by the grace of God with a beautiful space that I can do this. So it's like, this is meant for you. So yeah, it's a struggle. I still go home and cry sometimes, like, oh shit, how am I gonna pay this? And like, but I wake up and it's another year. I wake up and it's another year. So those things, instead of saying, this is hard, this is a struggle, now I wake up and say, well, God said I was supposed to be here, I still have purpose, so I'm blessed to have it. So now you can't tell me on a slow day, okay, she'll not have appointments, all right, well, I guess I'll go home and take a nap. Instead of saying, oh my God, what am I gonna do? This is terrible. I'm not doing this right, and I'm just, so stressed and worried. And I go back to my bad habits of grieving. But now I'm turning it around to receiving. and that's how it affects my faith. So I'm gonna stop now because I feel my throat getting lumpy. It's coming. It's coming. I'm getting better. But that is definitely how it affects my grieving, because now, before I felt so broken, so stressed and so worried, and I was always asking why. Now I'm trying to understand, like, well, why not? Why not me? Because if I could look at you and say how beautiful you are, and how wonderful of a woman you are, and how amazing and talented you are, why can't I look at myself and say that? So if I can say that to you and to myself, why can't I look at you and say, well, why am I going through this? Well, you are too. So why not me too? But we're here to share it, right? And that's why this beautiful woman here has this panel for us to share these things. Because it is meant for us to go through this. Because everything that we go through isn't always just for us.
I have a poem I would like to share that touches on this. And it's funny hearing y'all read y'all's poetry earlier. I wasn't even thinking about this because so you'll hear, you'll see the connection. But it's called Even When. I'm okay. Even when we wonder how God could allow us to hurt in this way, even when we doubt his goodness and can't find the words to pray, even when we find ourselves in seasons we never thought we'd be, even when our hearts are overwhelmed by unrelenting grief, even when what we feel is shared by no one else, even when we're struggling and don't know how to ask for help, even when we cry out to him because we want a different path, even when there are no answers to all the questions that we've asked, even when we shake our fists towards heaven for the unfairness of it all, God, our loving Father, he can take it all. And thank you. That poem, I think I wrote it in 2018. Like, yeah, I am a very empathetic person. So I tend to take on, like, if other people are going through and dealing with things, then I feel some measure of that also. So earlier that year with Nicole's mom, that year I had also lost a cousin, and just another friend of mine at that time. Her mom was like, we knew was that she was approaching. I don't think she was in hospice care at the time, but we knew it was close. And so having been surrounded by those things, and at the time I was not working full time, because I had quit my job. That's a different story for a different day, different time. But I just was in a very heavy place emotionally, and it was at a place where I'm like, Lord, I ain't even talking to you. Like, I'm not even talking to you right now. You know, like that's where we are. You know, so a lot of times, and I didn't think about this earlier when you asked the question, but just in terms of a response to grief, what does that usually look like? And you kind of touched on this earlier as well, just like how things come out of you creatively when you are going through, and that's how it is for me often. So like a lot of times my grief, I work through that creatively. So it might be writing something, it might be, a lot of times it's a song or something like that. So so in this particular case, that's just where I was, and just finding comfort in the fact that even in the midst of my questions and my anger and like feeling like this is unfair, I don't know why you got me here, you know, even in the midst of all of that, you know, knowing, and as you mentioned earlier, I feel like I gotta call you Miss Sister Terry, Miss, like I can't just call you by your first name. Right. But as you were saying earlier, you know, like he can take it all. He is able to withstand all of, you know, whatever we're throwing at him in response to whatever grievous situation that we're dealing with. And so that phrase of, you know, like, Lord, okay, I just started talking to you again. Like I've said that a number of times to him, just even recently. It's like, okay, so like even